Welcome to the Rayab program's Advanced Cross-Section module. This video assumes you are already familiar with the Standard Cross-Section module, which has its own video. All Standard Cross-Section module features are included with the Advanced Cross-Section module. This video will review the following Advanced Cross-Section features: process from 2 to 3,000 soundings per diagram, analyze diagrams with user-configurable color gradients, simultaneously display 1, 2, or 3 panels per diagram, display any 2 diagrams with the compare mode, zoom in and out on any section of the plotted diagram, and automate time height diagrams with batch options. First, we'll review the Advanced Cross-Section module's ability to process up to 3,000 soundings per diagram. If a multi-sounding data file contains more than 3,000 soundings, Rayab will only process the first 3,000 soundings in the file. Here's a sample time height diagram containing 764 soundings. Note the vertical gray lines and the gray areas. These represent the 764 sounding profile locations. When you move the mouse over the diagram, each sounding's identification information is displayed below the diagram. The blank areas indicate gaps in the data stream of sounding profiles. Let's right-click the mouse to demonstrate how to turn off these vertical lines. Here we have the diagram options panels, and let's focus on the Format tab, and then the option near the bottom called Draw Vertical Line to identify horizontal position. Let's turn off this option and see what happens. The vertical lines disappear. And now let's turn this option back on. The displayed time height diagram does not contain wind data, so let's load a different data set. Here's a time height diagram containing 139 soundings. Wind plots often appear cluttered with diagrams containing more than 100 profiles. So to help alleviate the cluttered appearance, there's an option that lets you systematically skip every few profiles. To see this, right-click the mouse for the Diagram Options panels, and then view the Data tab. And at the bottom, there's the Wind Plot Display Interval option. Just move the slider tab to the desired interval. In this case, we'll select an interval that plots wind data for every 5th profile. And now we can better see the wind directions and speeds. And now we'll review the second feature of the Advanced Cross-Section module, which is its ability to colorize or paint diagram analyses. Here's a time height diagram with wind data. We'll now perform a wind speed analysis, but first with just isopleths, which is the diagram default setting. And now we'll turn on the Colorize option from the Options menu, and then select the Colorize Analyses option. And we'll again activate the Analysis toolbar and again analyze wind speeds. And now we can see a colorized analysis with its associated color bar legend. And if we again click on the wind speed toolbar button, we can overlay wind speed isopleths. And if we again click on the wind speed toolbar button, all analyses are erased, just as if we used the refresh button. Here again, we've started with the wind speed analyses, but this time we'll overlay the CAT, or Clear Air Turbulence analysis. And when we again click on the CAT button, only the CAT isopleths are erased, leaving the colorized wind speed analysis for further comparisons. And now we can overlay any other toolbar analyses, such as the equivalent potential temperature isopleths, and then add others like the tropopause, or however many other overlays you want to plot. Now let's look at where these color gradients come from. Just right-click on the toolbar button of interest, which in this case is the wind speed button. And now we see the wind speed configuration options panel. The left side of the panel applies only to isopleth options, while the right side contains the color gradient option. It says that the first parameter analyzed will be painted with the gradient pattern shown below, which we already demonstrated. And to edit or change this gradient, we just click on this Change Gradient button. This is the Gradient Editor, a full-featured editing system containing several predefined gradients with the ability to create any gradient a user might need. For an in-depth explanation of the Gradient Editor's use and functions, please see the Gradient Editor video. Before leaving this editor, let's look at the Gradient Library's list of default gradients. The last one is labeled WinBarbs. This doesn't apply to any of the toolbar analyses buttons. Instead, it applies to the appearance of the diagram's plotted winds. So let's close the Gradient Editor and see how this works. Right-click the mouse again to display the Diagram Options panels, and then the Data tab. Then within the Wind section, there is a subsection called Color. By default, wind plots are colored with a black color. And then there's also the gray color option, which provides a lighter plot appearance. And then there's the color option, which will now execute. And here we see each wind plot is colored according to the above color bar gradient. This also works for the variable shafts option, and it works for the vectors option. And now let's look at the Advanced Cross-Section Modules option to display 2 and 3 panel diagrams at the same time. First, right-click the mouse for Diagram Options, and then the Format tab, and then select the 2-panel display option. Here, the Analyze menu option is no longer functional since the Analyses toolbar has been replaced by these drop-down menu options. For example, let's analyze the top panel with relative humidity. Then analyze the bottom panel with clouds. Then we'll overlay a meteogram plot of the sweat index on the top panel, and overlay the total totals index on the bottom panel. Okay, now let's see a 3-panel diagram display. In here we've already analyzed 3 panels with wind speed, U and V component values. There's also an option to overlay contours for any colorized gradient. On the second panel, let's add a meteogram plot of the surface wind speed. And on the third panel, let's add the wind plots. To do this, right-click the mouse to open the Diagram Options panels, and then the Data tab. In the Wind section, we see options for displaying wind plots. The top option only applies to the default single-panel diagram. The multi-panel options let you control which panels contain plotted winds, and in this case, we'll select the third panel. Now let's look at the Advanced Cross-Sections Compare Mode option. This option lets you compare any 2 diagrams, where these 2 menu options let you load the 2 different datasets. While all examples shown so far have displayed 1, 2, and 3 panel diagrams, they have all been of the same dataset. This Compare option can display 2 different datasets. For example, you can display 2 different time-height diagrams, such as for 2 different months. Or you can display 2 different cross-sections for 2 different parallels of latitude and of the same time period. Or finally, you can display a time-height diagram against any cross-section diagram for various diagnostic purposes. Now let's look at the Advanced Cross-Sections Zoom function. This Zoom menu option does not activate the zoom function, but it does provide brief instructions. It says to hold down the Control key while dragging the mouse to define the diagram area to be expanded. So let's give it a try. Here we loaded a time-height diagram with an interesting wind pattern at the left portion of the diagram. To zoom in on this section, just hold down the Control key and then click the mouse to initiate the zoom function. Then drag the mouse as a rubber band style box outlines the zoom area of interest. With the zoom box defined, then just release the mouse and Control key, and RAYAB automatically redraws the time height diagram as defined by the zoom box area. With this newly expanded zoom view, you can use the toolbar to analyze the diagram as usual. You can also drill down the data further by applying another zoom to this expanded diagram like this. At any time during the zoom process, you can use the File menu to save this dataset to a unique file name for later recall. Or you can easily return to the original diagram with this Restore menu. And note that this zoom function also works with the 2 and 3 panel diagram displays. And finally, we'll look at the last feature of the Advanced Cross-Section module: how time height diagrams can be created with batch commands. We start by first configuring the batch options. They are found under the File menu's Batch Load Configuration Options. Here is the time height diagram's Batch Load Configuration Options panel. This light yellow information box at the top is provided as an example of a batch or script command. And here is an actual example script line. Soundings.dat is an actual multi-sounding data file which contains the time series forecast sounding data, such as a BUFKit file. Note that the config parameter is optional. When used, it can only be entered as config 1, 2, or 3. Use this Configuration Options button just below to configure those 3 options. Here is where those 3 configuration options are defined. And note that there is a separate video explaining these options in detail. Now back to the Batch Load Options panel. These below options specify what happens to the time height diagram when the batch is executed. You can save the displayed diagram to File, and you can export key sounding data elements. Note that the export function requires the optional Advanced Export module. After all options have been set, then just use this button to save all settings. And note that any existing diagram analyses options will also be saved, such as the temperature, wind speed, etc. And in this case, this Notice panel indicates that there are no current analyses to save. Before ending this video, note that there is another way of automating time height diagram creation. This can be done in real time through the use of the optional Real-Time Data Processor module. This module can be accessed from the Displays menu, and then the Real-Time Display option. This special real-time data processor also has options for weather alert warnings. And see the Real-Time Data Processor video for more information. And that completes the Advanced Cross-Section module video. Thank you for watching.